A former President Trump-endorsed Republican has won the GOP nomination for a seat on Capitol Hill after fighting off 10 other contenders. Former coal lobbyist Mike Carey won the special primary election for Ohio's 15th district on Tuesday. It was a race Mr. Trump was closely following. He held a last-minute tele-rally for Carey the night before polls opened. Carey will face Democrat Allison Russo in the general election this November. So for some analysis on this race and what it means for the Republican Party moving forward, I want to bring in Joe Watkins and Leslie Sanchez. Joe is a former aide to President George H.W. Bush. Leslie is a CBS News political analyst and Republican strategist. Thanks for joining us this morning, guys. Leslie, I'm going to start with you. The 15th district sits in the middle of Ohio, but it excludes Columbus. It's voted for a Republican Congress member for the past 10 years. Does Carey winning the primary with Mr. Trump's endorsement tell us much about the former president's current influence on the Republican Party?
If you're still a Trump supporter, they would definitely say yes. It's hard to argue that out of a grouping of 11 that he came out on top. Now, it's with a smaller percentage, obviously, but enough to win the primary. It's definitely an important point. It's a feather in the former president's cap. But you look at a couple of things, and you alluded to it, Anne-Marie. This is a plus 14 Republican district. It's an area that Trump actually outperformed Mitt Romney in, for president. So all the indicators are it's continued to lean red. It's going to continue to have the echoes of the former president's message, and that's what you heard in Carey. What it didn't match, though, in terms of Trump endorsement were the dollars. Not only Mike Carey, but also you can look at Susan Wright, Texas 06. And those were candidates that with endorsements that were still significantly outspent. So the endorsement didn't necessarily translate into dollars. And that's what I think a lot of Republicans are looking at when they dig a little deeper.
Oh, that's interesting. Joe, a pro-Trump PAC, speaking of spending money, a pro-Trump PAC is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on ads for candidates, including Carey. What was it like with your former boss, George H.W. Bush? How involved was he in politics after he left the White House? And what do you make of Mr. Trump's participation?
I think President George H.W. Bush had a much lower profile post-presidency. He didn't endorse lots of people for office. Rob Portman, who worked with me in the White House, won a special election for Congress in, I think, 1993 and served a number of years in the House before working for George W. Bush and then being elected to the U.S. Senate in the 2000s. But other than that, his two sons, of course, Jeb and George W., ran for governor in 1994. George W. won, Jeb lost, had to wait till 98 to win the governor's seat. But President Bush played it pretty low key. He, of course, supported Bob Dole in '96 for president. He supported his son, George W., in the 2000 election. He supported a couple of Texas congressmen in 2004. Those are endorsements that he gave. And then he endorsed Tom Kean Jr. for the U.S. Senate seat, I think in about 2008. Kean went on to not win that U.S. Senate race. But that being said, those are really the few endorsements that he had as a post-president for candidates running for Congress or the U.S. Senate.
So Mike Carey's messaging really echoed the former President Trump's talking points, even, using America First, that phrase, and pitching himself as an outsider, despite the fact that he's a coal lobbyist, so he's unlikely to be an outsider. That's about as inside as you get. Do you expect, Leslie, GOP primary and midterm elections to sort of follow this line of messaging?
They really are. And the other area that's really a strong echo point from the former president's campaign is border security, failure along immigration lines. You're constantly hearing that drumbeat, not only along the Southwest and people related, connected to the U.S.-Mexico border, but all across the Republican Party. It's one message that certainly resonates, especially in comparison to what they believe are failures on the Biden, a quick start or a failure to start with the Biden administration. So don't expect that to deny. And another area to watch is George P. Bush, obviously in Texas, running for Attorney General, very competitive, very tough to raise money there. He's relying on his father's, contacts and to those big bundlers to bring that money in. But he is echoing the Trump message every other, minute. That's going to be something that a lot of people are following. And Texas is very unique in that sense, and he has his own popularity and his own family legacy. But the connection is peculiar even to people within Texas to constantly hear the drumbeat of Trump and see if that strategy is going to be as effective.
You know, Joe, looking at the midterms sort of across the board, what sort of messaging and what sort of policies do you think Republicans should be emphasizing?
I think Republicans will play on some of the themes that have been important and successful for Republicans in the past. You know, of course, taxes, the cost of this legislation that's coming out, what it means to the average person, and certainly what it means to people who have built up some wealth, people who own businesses, small businesses, and who don't like the thought of having to give all that money back and being taxed doubly and triply by the U.S. government. So the issue of taxes, of course, and regulation will always be central, I think, to the Republican message. Don't be surprised if you hear that drumbeat as we head toward 2022. The cost of Joe Biden's legislative agenda, what it means for Americans, and how it sets us back.
Leslie, tell us more broadly about the strategy forming for Republicans to take back Congress. What are candidates and campaigns focusing on?
In many ways, you have a lot of research being done, Emery, about how to distance themselves from what was the Trump aura to find the Republican message as it stands now. A lot of what we just heard on the economy, the impacts, paying for a lot of these very massive spending bills, is tried and true Republican messaging. But the contrast is going to be there, like on the issues of inflation, that the inflation has continued to go up. Democrats have not been good stewards of the economy. They'll say that the policies are continuing to shrink the economy. And of course, not just pandemic response, but is it enough to stimulate, aside from just throwing a lot of money into these economies, is there enough good management to stimulate and allow these states to continue to grow economically? That's what Republicans are listening to, and I would say independent or right-leaning voters are listening to from that economic message. And that's where Republicans are doing a lot of research right now to find the folks who maybe were not happy with Trump's message, still went for the Republican Party, or perhaps moved over to the Biden side, but how to bring them back. The only other part I would add, Anne-Marie, is Republicans are in a really good position as it looks to redistricting, even better than they were 10 years ago. So they're looking and waiting for those census numbers to come out. They feel that we've done really well on the state legislative side and to be a very aggressive part of that conversation. And that's where a lot of think of state dollars and state focus tied to where these House seats are going to be allocated is all lining up.
I wish I could talk to you guys more. We're running out of time because I find it very interesting that, you know, distancing from the Trump aura while at times embracing it or trying to capitalize on it, I think is going to be a challenge moving forward for the Republican Party. But Leslie and Joe, hopefully we can pick up this conversation at a later date. Thank you so much.
Thank you.